Thank you for being here with us, and shout out to Bruce, our common friend, who made it. Basically, as we've been discussing, what I try to do with this series of podcasts or episodes and guests is actually to give different perspectives about the industry. And now we are focusing, specifically on the impact of football or soccer in the US and vice versa from the US outside. And we've been having conversations with different American executives or people engaged with the sport, and wanted to give that perspective. I think that's of great value for the network that we built around this in terms of understanding the business, understanding different perspectives. And as you know, I'm Dominican, and being Dominican, baseball is kind of our first reference, and the US is a reference market for us. But here in Europe, we've always said that the from the business perspective, the US has a more evolved offering and management and different styles. So we'll go over those details. But we want to give that flavor and that perspective from the market outside, especially when speaking about football, which is as global of a game as it could be. So we wanted to start with you to understand, who you are, where you come from, and your, standing and in the industry, and how everything came to be now that you are on the other side of the business as an agent as well.
Okay, that sounds good. So, I mean, I've been employed now, I guess, in every aspect of the game, even at grassroots level, at every level, with the exception of ownership right now. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, very much, as we call it, like a meat and potato area. It was American football, baseball, basketball. Those were the main sports, ice hockey, and no professional league, with the exception of the major indoor soccer league at the time when I was growing up. For the 1990 World Cup, the U.S. qualified for the first time in I don't know how many years it was. And that was really when the evolution of the game restarted, so to speak, in the U.S. There had been some semi-pro leagues that had started, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. But really, if anyone was to play professional soccer, it was overseas or in Mexico or in South America. Most of the time, it was players that were born abroad that obtained U.S. citizenship. Every now and again, a player from university would go to Europe, but it wasn't the norm. I think that the good and the bad of that was, the good of it was every top player in the United States went and played in college. So the college ended up being, like right now, the under 23 Premier League in the UK, because and it was very, very competitive. It just wasn't professional. So we were getting, as American players, we were getting a late start on our development as players. That you were in Barcelona, for instance, and you were really good at 15, 16, 17 years of age, you were already training with the first team from time to time. And with and amongst fantastic players in the academy. We didn't even have the start of a professional team until 1995, 96, or 96, 97, one of those two. I think it was maybe 96, 97.
The birth of the MLS.
Yeah. So where soccer is now in the U.S. and where it was back then, I mean, it's completely night and day. We still have a lot of deficiencies over here, without a doubt, and we don't have the tradition of any of the leagues in Europe or South America or Mexico. But we're starting to form our own traditions over here as time goes by, and a lot of big businesses and a lot of very wealthy businessmen and women own teams in MLS, own teams in USL. You know, USL is starting to become stronger and stronger as a second division market. But most of us that got opportunities, as I would say, were Americans born and raised in the United States. From my era, anyways, it was a 5% chance that you would go to Europe and get a contract. My pathway, looking back on it, it's mainly luck. You know, there was an assistant coach named Dean Wurzberger at UCLA who changed his flight. He either changed his flight or missed his flight. And I was playing at a small tournament in Virginia. And he came back to the fields where I was playing because I was getting recruited for other sports, not soccer. And then he told the late Siggy Schmid, "You got to see this goalkeeper." And that's how my career started. There was no scouting networks. There were no, true scouting networks. You got on a plane and you flew around the country and you watched. And then from that point on, it was Siggy calling Lothar Osianda, who was the Olympic team coach, and saying, "You got to see this kid." And that's how my career started. There wasn't, it wasn't like I wasn't in any national team pools. I wasn't in anything of that nature. And it was just luck followed by a phone call. And then I went in and performed. But that's how my career started. And then in 1992, I played in the Olympics in Barcelona. And Nottingham Forest signed me on the back of that. And after that, the rest is history. But I stayed in Europe from 1997 clear through until 2015. When I moved, and I retired relatively early from the national team. It was the long flights were taking its toll on my body. So I officially retired in 2004 from the national team when I could have played a fair few more years, seeing how I played until I was 44. But when I came back, I went into the media side of things and also the head coach of the under-19 national team. And the landscape of things in the U.S. was so different. You know, there was the stadiums, the training grounds, the scouting networks, technical advisory boards that were set up amongst the federation, the MLS. The salary caps in MLS were ever increasing, and they're increasing by the day as we speak now. The sophistication of the league is getting better. Players in Europe, I think, still see it as a secondary league. A lot of players in Europe still would see it as a place to go when they're retired. But what happens now is if you have that mentality as a European player and you come over, you don't perform well because it's too hard of a league to have that mentality now. So is it as good as La Liga or Premier League or Bundesliga or Liga at the moment? No, it's not. But it's still a very competitive league and it's getting better. It's getting better every year. You know, I've sat on quite a few executive boards now, and now I own and operate the U.S. office of Promo Esport. And so now, which I never had in my career, I'm 50 years old now, on the inside of speaking on how certain executives do their actual business and their deals. And it's yet another eye opener, because
absolutely,
I have what is a well-run club and what is not a well-run club. And, it's pretty accurate. My thinking's pretty accurate when I sit in front of some executives and see how they do business. From a player's perspective, of course, not a fan's perspective, but from a player's perspective. And it's the educational process has been immense. But the evolution of soccer from 1990 till 2021, as we're talking, has been truly magnificent here. And as hopefully we get this pandemic well and truly sorted out, and if we do, the World Cup will bring so many more resources to the U.S. And it'll explode again.
Yeah, and actually to link that to a bit of a personal side, I mean, you're speaking very clear about the two, momentum speeds, let's say, in terms of what was in the 90s and what it is right now. And I want your take in terms of, from the player's perspective, being able to suit up for your national team and be able to be at a great event, the Olympics in 92, World Cup 94, and what it meant actually socially for the sport that you were representing. What was that feeling back then? And what do you think is the difference now in terms of the momentum that in which this 2026 World Cup will arrive in?
We were my generation of player, and you don't realize this at the time, but we were more the pioneers for a lot of things. Now there were some players older than me that really started things off in Europe. Tab Ramos, Roy Wegerle, Thomas Dooley, players of this nature. But I would say myself and Claudio Reyna, Brian McBride, Joe Max Moores, John O'Brien, Tony Santa, Frankie Haida, Casey Keller, Jurgen Sommer. And I know I'm missing a whole host of players, so I apologize to any players that I've missed. But we were the ones that had to sort of formulate the basis of the contract now, the collective bargaining agreement for the men's players right now. We were the ones that had to go on strike, threaten to go on strike. At the time, we were the ones that were, really on a bonus of, even after the 94 World Cup, of around $250 a game. And we exploded it. We stuck our feet in and we got a real good basis for the contracts that the players are still operating under now today. Obviously, they've signed new collective bargaining agreements for more monies. On the flip side of that, I also now, being a lot more experienced, so to speak, older experience, to say what you want. When we did go and put that shirt on with the national team, the pride was immense. I mean, it's the best thing that you can do in your career. It truly is. But we also, as players, just automatically felt money grew on trees, and now I know, talking to a lot of people and knowing exactly what's there and what isn't there, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. Yep. The U.S. Soccer Federation was stretched all the time. So what I was getting at, there was an enormous sense of pride, but we were also fighting with this. We were underpaid all the time. So there were a few trips that we would go into, and it's a shame looking back on it, because that overtook the fantastic emotion that of playing for your national team. It took it away sometimes, because we would go in with all this animosity and all this pent up frustration, and not all the time. And it was always fantastic to see your friends, especially when you were living in different countries all over the world, and you could come in and meet them and play with them and all that. But it was a shame. There were some instances along the way that was so frustrating, because we always felt that we were underpaid. But looking back on everything, it was far more of an emotional high than lows, and such a wonderful thing to look back on a career and know that you've put on the national team shirt even just once is amazing for an individual.
No, absolutely. Actually, looking from the outside, as I said, in Dominican, so we are, by any standard, we are not a soccer country, even though it's, developing and booming. But I remember my first football memory comes out of the 94 World Cup, and basically out of the marketing and the promotion and everything around, and kind of that, that feeling of especially the American players becoming kind of pop culture icons at that time. It's kind of the Americanization of soccer, because usually what you saw is either very old footage, very grainy, and now you see, I remember the design of the uniform there with the flag. Lalas, Kobe, kind of that type of mentality which you are accustomed to see in other sports like the NBA and basketball, and how the players kind of gave you that vibe. And I always tell that my first, and that's probably why I'm kind of so obsessed with marketing and sports marketing, is that the promotion that got me hooked to the World Cup was actually a Pizza Hut promotion, and they were having Pele also as a figurehead of the campaign, and I it for me was wonderful to see how you could do that, and I could now listening to you, I could relate to actually the feeling that probably isn't is actually because of not all the information was properly shared, of players seeing, okay, we are putting this show, this is what is happening, full stadiums, a lot of brands, where's our money, that type of thing, without understanding that this is not on US soccer. This is actually an organization that is called FIFA, and they have their kind of their deals, right?
And also, like, so Alexi, I worked with at Fox. I played with him. He was my roommate. I think it was '94 World Cup. Like, at the time when he and Kobe were getting marketed, had the dreadlocks, and Alexi had the big goatee. I tell you what, looking back on it, we needed it, because we didn't have. You're talking now. I think a lot of us thought at the time, oh, you don't have to market individuals. The game will grow and this, that, and the other. But we needed it. Lexi and Kobe became two pivotal marketable players of our generation, no doubt. And I know Lexi had a small stint in Italy, but his career was mainly in the U.S. And Kobe's was, other than a short stint in Coventry, was all in the U.S. So they were huge for the sport. They each had a bit of a unique. They were both completely different players, but they were marketable. And we didn't have too many players that were eccentric enough to be marketed. You saw Carlos Valderrama's hair from
from a mile away,
mile away, and everyone knew. It was Jorge Campos and his uniforms that he wore. He stood out. He stood out a mile away. Players in Mexico were marketed because the culture allowed it. Players in Mexico didn't necessarily have to have an eccentric look if they played well, because the game was so far advanced. In the US, the game wasn't far advanced at all. So a player had to have a little something extra to be marketable. Had to have a certain look. So, Kobe and Alexi did an enormous amount for the sport in the US on notoriety and being noticed on a global stage. And I know Lex, before we played England in '94 at Wembley, Alexi went and did an interview in England and basically told, I don't know if I can't remember the quote exactly, but he either said he was going to teach Alan Shearer how to play soccer, or they were over there to teach England how to play. I can't remember it, but we lost 2-0, and Alan Shearer scored 2 goals directly against Alexi, and he told him exactly how he felt about it. But things like that helped us.
Yeah, and actually, it is a great story, because sport in general, this, you've been a player, you've been an executive, now you're an agent, revolves around the storylines. I mean, you need to make the sport marketable. I mean, winning and dominating a sport is one thing, but then you need to fill a lot of gaps within. And actually, this is something that probably you sense. Even you were part of the Olympic team that went to Barcelona. There's a before and after for global basketball from that the year, and actually having the dream team there. Not only Michael, I mean, that team actually transformed basketball, but actually you need to actually have a decisive, you need to have the product and a decisive strategy and actually create those heroes, right? And that's, after that point is when actually basketball became global. So and I wanted to, this is one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you. You from let's say a player agent, player manager side of things, where do you see, especially in world soccer, that hero creation will come from? Right? For example, Alexi and Kobe were, homegrown heroes. They were eccentric somehow, and people could, engage with them beyond the game, but they were homegrown athletes, right? Now you have, American stars, young American stars, basically killing it in Europe and being in the biggest football clubs here, becoming stars on their own, right? And, do you see that being the future of U.S. soccer in terms of, exporting such amount of great talent that they become heroes over there? And it's just about the pride of that they're, dominating outside of the country.
Yeah, it's finally evolved to a point where it you don't necessarily have to have a look to be marketable. If you're good, you'll get marketed now, if you're the top. But we've also evolved to that point where you're only really going to get marketed if you are the top.
Yeah.
We went through this stage where pretty much every player on the national team, and maybe even like going into, player number 30 had a boot deal. Well, now things have changed a little bit where there's, players will get equipment deals, but the real cash only comes to the
top 5 players.
Yeah. So the great thing about it is, Christian Pulisic gets marketed because he's a great player. Weston McKennie gets marketed because he's a great. Tyler Adams is a great player. He truly is. But he's got to do a couple more years before he's going to get marketed massively, if you know what I mean. And his position on the field doesn't lend as much to the marketability, even though Tyler Adams is a great guy, a great player. I mean, he kills it in Europe, but not as many people. Tyler Adams' name won't roll off the tongue of as many people in the U.S. as Christian Pulisic does.
Yeah.
He was at Dortmund. He had a 60 million, either pound or euro, I don't know what it was, price tag on him. And he's now at Chelsea, and they just won the Champions League. And it's starting, he's going to have the marketability because he's good. And in the U.S., it's still a little different. In the U.S. markets, it's sometimes more of the look and other anecdotes. Obviously, the money on the marketing side of things is not as big for the men's player. The women's players, it's different, and that's for sure. But but it is growing more and more. The truly great thing from my perspective is you're getting marketed now because you're good, which means that the fans are starting to, in the US, are starting to really understand the game. And it's not just fans that have culture and tradition from outside of the United States that are following the sport, because you need more numbers and you need more masses of people to really truly become a marketing sensation.
Yeah, you need to be mainstream, because actually if it's on the niche of the sport, the practitioners, the kids that play the sport, that's kind of an easy grab. And actually, I speak with a lot of agents and advisors of players telling that what brands are looking actually is incremental revenue each year, right? So if you are very popular on the kids that play the sport, that's one thing. If you are a big brand, you are already dominating that space anyhow. So what else you can bring to that? And actually, that's the key there.
Right, and you need to be in the thoughts and the minds, yes, of the children, to say to their moms and dads that I want to buy this shirt, for instance, or this bowl of cereal, or this type of cereal, or whatever it is. But then you also have to appeal to the mom and dad so they pay for it.
Yeah,
because exactly. If the 6-year-old wants it or the 8-year-old wants it, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get it.
No, definitely. Actually, that's there's a lot of anecdotes back in the '90s with in basketball, especially with Dennis Rodman and everything. He was very popular, not necessarily the type of role model that parents wanted to invest their money in, right? You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's a good distinction. Actually, and taking it back to your experience, both on the as a player and in the relationship in terms of the management, and you were alluding to that now you understand what is a good management versus a management that is not as good in terms of managing a club. With your experience in Europe, you played in different European markets, and even from within here in Europe, we see the differences in terms of the more elevated or evolved way of management. So comparing England to Spain or to Italy or to Turkey, you've been around. When you look at that perspective, and now that you sit with the executives on behalf of your clients, what do you reckon in terms of differences between the European markets and from the European style as a whole compared to the US and North American market in terms of management and that style that we recognize?
And you're talking playing or marketing
Marketing and management.
Turkey's an interesting one because there's the fan bases are enormous, especially if you're at Galatasaray, Fenerbahce, Beşiktaş, and whatnot. Salaries are very, very good and competitive. The masses in Turkey are not wealthy. So when you get into the management side of things, the way that income is generated over there for the clubs is by the clubs qualifying for European football and the television contracts paying for it. Their second largest source of income is not ticket sales. It's not concessions. It's not match day revenues. It's selling players.
Yeah.
So, so the in Turkey, the marketing it just happens without paying the players, because so if you're at Galatasaray, they employ, the club doesn't, but the newspapers, each newspaper is sectioned off, and they employ 2, 3, 4 cameramen every day, and they follow the players everywhere around Istanbul. I mean, they pop up everywhere, and there's pictures everywhere of all, so you get marketed by way of media. You're on TV all the time, but it's not as if Pepsi or Coca-Cola are going to come up and sign a player. They'll give Turkish national team players, excuse me, Turkish national team players contracts before a Euros or before a World. But it's a little bit different over there. When you get into England and you're in the Premier League at one of the top clubs, the management train that is over there, the marketing train, the tentacles that they reach to are enormous. I mean, it is an absolute monster of a business machine. Unbelievable product on the field, unbelievable fan base, unbelievable reach inside the country, unbelievable reach globally. Whether you think the league is the best in terms of the best quality football or not, that's to each his own. But the business mechanism that the Premier League is, and the income and interest it generates around the world, is second. Bundesliga is run incredibly well. La Liga has, fantastic talent. I mean, the players and the standard of football is immense. But on a business side of things and a marketing side of things, Real Madrid and Barcelona take over almost the entire, not even country or league, the globalization of La Liga. I mean, Atletico Madrid is an incredible team, but it's Real Madrid, Barcelona when it comes to the marketing and management and things of that nature.
Yeah.
each country has their own little idiosyncrasies on guaranteed revenues and bonus related revenues. When you get into your Hollands and your Belgiums and your Germanys, a lot less of the money is guaranteed until you're at the real big clubs. You can make incredible money, no doubt, but it's mainly based on appearing and winning to get that huge money. Premier League, it's mainly all guaranteed income. And then when you sign the Premier League contract, the marketing and management, as a player, if you don't have an individualized contract off the field as far as an endorsement, you're still marketed in the Premier League almost every day globally because of the media arms that they have globally.
The exposure is huge. Yeah.
It's enormous. So if you're a company looking to endorse a player, NBC, SN over here has the Premier League, and they do a wonderful job with it. And you were a company and you wanted to endorse Christian Pulisic, you would see Christian Pulisic every week.
Yeah.
Provided he's not injured. All throughout, anyone in the United States who wanted to watch him, and the Premier League Productions throws games all over the globe.
Yeah. It's interesting because now, and I have the experience in basketball, when you talk about the globalization and actually from a player's perspective in terms of going abroad, usually what you see, there are evidently in basketball, the goal is always reaching the NBA. Then there are different pathways. So you can go overseas a few years, you come back or whatever. There's the EuroLeague, which is that next to the NBA is the biggest competition. But what you see a lot now in terms of younger talent that wants to bypass the NCAA system is actually going to places in which culturally it's easier for them to adapt and actually, go by that year that they need to in order to be eligible for the draft, right? So going to Australia or going to certain leagues in which the country is very fluent, language is a basic, right? In terms of that you can communicate in English, that you can bring your family over. From a player's perspective, when you look on the other way around, and we were speaking about that notion that it's going, it's less and less, but still is that, the MLS as a destination for a top soccer player, it's, if you want to start winding down your career, and you mentioned that if you come into that mentality, you have a higher number to be unsuccessful because it's quite competitive. But in terms of adapting to life and the facilities that teams put around people's families and feeling them welcome, what do you reckon in terms of the difference of you guys going over to Europe compared to, playing in the US?
I can only speak for myself. Moving country, and when I say that, I have my opinions on it. If you go to Spain as an American and go over to Spain, easy. You have to learn a language, but what a wonderful thing to have to do is learn another language. The housing, the infrastructure, the stadiums, the training grounds, all the employees they have to help the player. You go to Portugal, the same, Belgium, Holland, Germany, England. A little bit more difficult in Turkey. But I got to tell you, the 18 months I did in Turkey was probably the biggest learning as an individual that I've ever done in my life. Met some wonderful people. We all grow up in our little cocoons, and what you learn is every country's news stations are propaganda for their own country. I'm not saying it doesn't have to be negative propaganda. I'm not saying, it's how the country views things. So I go and I live in Turkey, and I mean, what a wonderful place to live, but if you live in certain areas of the world, you only hear about negativity coming out of Turkey.
Yeah.
And that is definitely not how I viewed Turkey and how the experience was for myself. So you have to, I think all the clubs around the world now, and the United States, by the way, have the infrastructure to look after any player. the stadium, the training ground, the staff to help with moves, to help with families, to help with kids, to help with schools. They all have it. So I think moving country to country is quite easy and actually quite exciting. I think if you have the opportunity to expand your mind, learn different languages, meet different people, understand different cultures, it'll help you in the long run as an individual.
Yeah, having that open mindset as a world citizen actually, allows you to live a very good life when you are abroad. And actually, that's something that I've been speaking with friends that are in the soccer player business, right? If it wasn't for the salary caps and exceptions, which I totally get, and actually I think in great part that's part of the recipe for success of the MLS in terms of steady growing and actually, not leaving anyone behind. I think that now players in Europe are starting to see a lot of what we could call, kind of the location star power. So before, when you look at the MLS, you were, it was Columbus, it was, certain, let's say, not to get anyone mad. I mean, especially family that I have living in certain cities, but actually it was, about not metropolis cities, not LA, not Chicago, not New York, not Miami, especially now, especially for certain players, the weather is important. And I think that now you start to see that, the league is competitive. It's the biggest, market in the world in terms of media and marketing and advertising in general. So it is a smart move business-wise if you are a top player in Europe. And then you have, good locations, especially for the South American or Hispanic players, going to a place like Miami that you actually can live without the necessity of actually being, English speaking.
I live in Miami now, and let's put it this way, my Spanish is getting much better.
That's for sure. That's for sure. It's probably one of the biggest cities in Latin America. That's what I heard.
You go.
No, definitely, and actually, that's important. And I wanted to link to kind of the last couple of questions that I have for you out of that, because when we see, governance and sports politics aside, now is some sort of transformation of the business and looking at it from a transnational perspective. So, I mean, you saw all the craziness that, this European Super League caused a couple of months ago. But in turn, you see that there are conversations, not that it's going to be easy or even possible, but conversations about what if we kind of bundle a North American kind of league and kind of have the best of Mexico, the best of the US, and the best of Canada, right? Especially now looking at 26, right? Why the European Super League, and this is a personal opinion, of course, but why the European Super League is preposterous and potential North American Super League could be feasible?
I think I think when American owners, and I've consulted for a few, when they go over to purchase clubs, they don't understand the true religion that soccer is in Europe. They really don't. And they can hear about it, talk about it, be told about it, but there are certain things in life that you won't understand until, you
immerse yourself in it. Yeah.
There's a reaction, you make an action and there's a reaction, right? Yeah. One of them, and they miss the boat a lot on it. A lot, not all American owners, but a lot of them do. And to basically say to the Premier League, well, we're better than you, we're bigger than you, we're leaving. Okay, that was a business decision, but not one fan wanted it to happen. The rest of what would have happened, the likelihood, if they would have done it, the Premier League would have just kicked them out forever. And then, the Aston Villas of this world would be getting the larger chunks of the Premier League money, and they would become the new Chelsea because they would have the money.
Yep.
And the Super League would be these teams that didn't have relegation and promotion, so they could maintain money. but I think it would have disintegrated football across Europe. Now, I think there are some deficiencies with with UEFA and whatnot, but I just think whenever you make a decision just solely based on finances in global soccer, you're going to get backlash.
Yeah,
because
there's a lot of passion involved, so to be just numbers, yeah.
Too many fans, too many supporters, too many companies spend their last dollar for the sport. Too many. And when you have that, and then they see greed on the other side, because they won't see it as necessity. I've seen the quotes from some of the owners: "We need this, or we'll fold financially." But fans won't see the necessity.
Yeah.
They'll only see greed. So.
No, definitely. Actually, I think what the biggest mistake was the way it was conveyed. It wasn't a good case they made for themselves, and I think that they were ill-advised in terms of, the timing, how to frame it. But when you open up that we're bankrupt and we need more money, it's not a good segue into actually trying to find a solution, because
it was poorly put out in the world. I don't want to see it happen like that. I'm more traditionalist. I don't mind rules. I don't mind excitement. I don't mind some change, but I wouldn't want to see, a certain country decimate. If you took, for instance, if you had a Super League and you took Rangers and Celtic out of Scotland, Scottish football dies.
No.
If you took Benfica, Sporting, and Porto out of Portugal, football dies.
Yeah, it needs to be a better system. I mean, probably there's something to be done at that, at the apex of that pyramid, that is more sustainable, that it generates more, and you can have a better spillover effect. But you need to have some, clear avenues on how everyone can benefit from it, right? And you need to be able to communicate that better. That's for sure. That's for sure. No, and actually, kind of in closing and through your perspective, we talk a lot about, the hero creation and how people kind of have those references. And you were talking about your own experience in terms of, the lack of professional soccer when you were coming up. How do you stack from the American perspective, the MLS and NWSL as drivers for notoriety and the adoption of the game and as an aspiration pathway, compared to the influx of the overseas leagues?
They both can help. The great thing for the American player is they have somewhere professional to go play. Excuse me. They have somewhere professional, so they can do both. They could watch European football in the morning when they wake up and go to their training, and they get the best of both worlds. So the young academy players at the clubs can go see the professional players at LA Galaxy, for instance, but they can wake up in the morning and watch Real Madrid play. So they can have their stars both. And what's happening in MLS and WSL, because they have the best national team, the women's national team players, they can actually see a lot of these stars over there. So if you're in New England right now, the best player in the league at this moment in time playing is Carlos Gil. So if you're a young academy player coming to training, you get to see Carlos, coming in. And so you've got your star there, but then you could watch Liverpool or Barcelona or Man City in the morning, and you can have that star as well. But there's actually people that you can touch and see and talk to now in the league, and the facilities are much better. So you could actually have your hero right in front of you, which has not always been the case in the U.S.
Yeah, no,
so I think you should have both.
No, definitely. I think that now when you have that crossover, we were alluding, Serginho Dest, Christian Pulisic, and you see also, guys that could be your neighbors in the US, going abroad and actually making it. That kind of is full circle to that hero creation. So you have the best of both worlds, and you know that pathway is a reality, that you could continue to develop your game, and eventually you can go up and play, at the top stage, which is, European football, right? So
Yeah.
just to in closing, in terms of the aspiration, we spoke about the impact the World Cup had in '94, and then the subsequent creation of the professional tier in soccer in the U.S. Now that we are ahead of probably one of the biggest World Cups that we'll see in 26, encompassing the whole of North America, do you expect that there's a shift of power in terms of commercial marketing interest, business interest, and actually the whole governance in terms of global football out of that World Cup? Is that something that is foreseeable?
Yeah. Coronavirus stopped the growth for a little bit, but yeah, I mean, '94 World Cup, it was immense for the sport, and having another World Cup here, it's going to generate so much revenue, and I think people in the game are far more educated now. The ones that will have their hands on the money, exactly where to spend it. I'm not saying that they did anything on purpose wrong, wrongfully spent the money in '94. It's just people are more educated now on what the actual needs are. So I think the masses and the money will be spent more wisely for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly hope so, because actually, and being me from the Caribbean, but as North America goes, it actually helps evolve everyone. And being part of the CONCACAF, I think is very good for the whole region. Even though you have the Central American powerhouses that every now and then are at the global stage, but I think that it will be tremendous for the whole continent, even for the South American game as well, which I think is in need of a revulsive and actually be able to continue to evolve. So, Brad, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate that you make this happen very early your time, and we definitely will want to have further conversations with you.
Very good, thanks, and you have a great afternoon.
This episode is brought to you, as always, by The Connect. The Connect is Raida Luis Baez. Follow the Intersection podcast in your favorite podcasting platform, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. This will really help us be found by more of you interested in the topics of sports marketing and deal making. Until the next one.